I was lying alone in my Boston mansion holding my heart medication when my son said, "Dad, you'll be fine. We're only going to Europe for a few weeks." I begged. "I need my medicine every day. You can't leave me now." He walked away with his luggage. After they left, I discovered my pills had been replaced. I thought I wouldn't survive. But when the door opened 52 days later, my son was the one who froze. Welcome to Wise Revenge. Right before we dive in, drop a quick comment for me. Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? Yes or no? Your answer might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. One quick note: some details in this story are fictionalized to emphasize the lesson, but the message it carries is what truly matters. I want to tell you about the day my son opened the mansion door and stood frozen like a dead man. That was day 52. But we're not there yet. First, you need to understand what I didn't see coming. 3 weeks before that moment, early March morning, Boston still cold enough to ice the bedroom windows, my son brought me oatmeal on a wooden tray. I was sitting propped against pillows in the second-floor master bedroom of our Back Bay mansion, the same room where my wife died 2 years earlier, 72 years old, widowed, chronically ill with heart failure and neurodegeneration that the doctors said would kill me without specialized medication taken on a precise daily schedule. Garrett set the tray across my lap with a smile I hadn't seen in years. 45 years old, my only son, the one who would carry the Harrington name forward. "Dad, I brought your breakfast," he said. "How are you feeling today?" The oatmeal was still steaming. I could smell cinnamon the way his mother used to make it. He'd even remembered the honey. "Better when you're here," I told him. He adjusted the pillows behind my back, checked the pill organizer on the nightstand, made sure the water glass was full. Every gesture careful, devoted. I remember thinking, finally, he has grown up. Finally, my son is becoming the man I hoped he'd be. Let me tell you who I was before the illness stripped everything down to bone. Walter Harrington, founder of Harrington Development Group. 40 years building Boston from blueprints and dirt into glass towers and waterfront condos. I'd survived recessions, bad partnerships, the kind of betrayals that come when money gets large enough to bend people's spines. I built an empire from nothing but stubbornness and a wife who believed I could. Then she died. Then my heart started failing. Then the neurodegeneration diagnosis came with a prescription list longer than my arm and a warning. "Without those pills, Mr. Harrington, your heart could stop at any second." So there I was, dependent, vulnerable, watching my son spoon-feed me oatmeal like I was the child. I should have seen it then. But when you want something badly enough, when you want your son to love you, you ignore the small wrongness in his eyes. I built this empire from scratch over 40 years. I never thought the only one who could destroy it would bear my last name. 5 days before they left, Garrett called me downstairs to the living room. Evening, the kind of dim March light that makes everything look older than it is. I came down slowly, one hand on the mahogany banister, the other clutching the pill bottle I carried everywhere now. Garrett stood by the fireplace. His wife, Simone, 41, sharp-featured and sharper-voiced, stood in the doorway, already wearing her coat, as if ready to leave. "Dad," Garrett said, "we've planned a European trip. 52 days, France, Italy, Switzerland." The words didn't land right away. I looked at him, at her, at the suitcase I now noticed sitting by the door. 52 days, I repeated. "We need this," he said. "It's been years since we traveled." My chest tightened. Not the heart condition, something else. "But I'm sick. Who will give me my medicine every day?" Simone's voice cut across the room like a blade on glass. "You can't expect our whole lives to revolve around a hospital." We need to live too. I looked at my son, waited for him to defend me, to say something, anything. He stayed silent. Not angry silence, not guilty silence, just empty. Like he'd already left and this was just the formality of his body catching up. "You're leaving me alone," I asked, "for almost 2 months." "Lorraine will check on you," Garrett said. Lorraine, our housekeeper, 63 years old, who came 3 times a week to cook and clean. "She'll make sure you're okay." Lorraine couldn't administer medication. Lorraine wasn't a nurse. Lorraine was kind, but she wasn't family. "Garrett," I said. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "I need help. Every day. The pills have to be exact." You'll manage," Simone said. She checked her watch like this conversation was already over. I looked into my son's eyes again. Searched for the boy who used to sit on my lap while I reviewed blueprints. The teenager who'd asked me how to build things that last. All I saw was that wrongness. Not cruelty. Not even indifference. Something worse, like he was looking at a problem that would solve itself if he just waited long enough. That night, I lay staring at the ceiling, Boston wind howling against century-old windows. Have you ever felt something shift in your gut, not fear yet? Just the shadow before fear arrives. On the bedside table, the heart medication bottle sat where it always did. Small orange plastic. White pills lined up like tiny soldiers. The label read, "Take 1 daily, same time, do not skip. Failure to comply may result in cardiac episode." I reached over, picked it up, shook it gently. The rattle was familiar, comforting. I didn't know yet that this was the last night real medication would sit in that spot. I didn't know that my son had already decided I wouldn't live to see day 53. I didn't know that in 72 hours, those pills would be replaced with something else entirely. But somewhere deep in the part of me that built 40-year empires and survived every betrayal Boston's business world could throw, that part knew. Something was wrong, and I was about to find out exactly how wrong. I want to tell you about the day my son opened the mansion door and stood frozen like a dead man. That was day 52. But we're not there yet. First, you need to understand what I didn't see coming. 3 weeks before that moment, early March morning, Boston still cold enough to ice the bedroom windows, my son brought me oatmeal on a wooden tray. I was sitting propped against pillows in the second-floor master bedroom of our Back Bay mansion, the same room where my wife died 2 years earlier. 72 years old, widowed, chronically ill with heart failure and neurodegeneration that the doctors said would kill me without specialized medication taken on a precise daily schedule. Garrett set the tray across my lap with a smile I hadn't seen in years. 45 years old, my only son, the one who would carry the Harrington name forward. "Dad, I brought your breakfast," he said. "How are you feeling today?" The oatmeal was still steaming. I could smell cinnamon the way his mother used to make it. He'd even remembered the honey. "Better when you're here," I told him. He adjusted the pillows behind my back, checked the pill organizer on the nightstand, made sure the water glass was full. Every gesture careful, devoted. I remember thinking, finally he has grown up. Finally, my son is becoming the man I hoped he'd be. Let me tell you who I was before the illness stripped everything down to bone. Walter Harrington, founder of Harrington Development Group. 40 years building Boston from blueprints and dirt into glass towers and waterfront condos. I'd survived recessions, bad partnerships, the kind of betrayals that come when money gets large enough to bend people's spines. I built an empire from nothing but stubbornness and a wife who believed I could. Then she died. Then my heart started failing. Then the neurodegeneration diagnosis came with a prescription list longer than my arm and a warning. Without those pills, Mr. Harrington, your heart could stop at any second. So there I was, dependent, vulnerable, watching my son spoon-feed me oatmeal like I was the child. I should have seen it then. But when you want something badly enough, when you want your son to love you, you ignore the small wrongness in his eyes. I built this empire from scratch over 40 years. I never thought the only one who could destroy it would bear my last name. 5 days before they left, Garrett called me downstairs to the living room. Evening. The kind of dim March light that makes everything look older than it is. I came down slowly, one hand on the mahogany banister, the other clutching the pill bottle I carried everywhere now. Garrett stood by the fireplace. His wife Simone, 41, sharp-featured and sharper-voiced, stood in the doorway, already wearing her coat, as if ready to leave. Garrett said, "We've planned a European trip. 52 days, France, Italy, Switzerland." The words didn't land right away. I looked at him, at her, at the suitcase I now noticed sitting by the door. 52 days, I repeated. "We need this," he said. "It's been years since we traveled." My chest tightened. Not the heart condition, something else. "But I'm sick. Who will give me my medicine every day?" Simone's voice cut across the room like a blade on glass. "You can't expect our whole lives to revolve around a hospital. We need to live too." I looked at my son, waited for him to defend me, to say something, anything. He stayed silent. Not angry silence, not guilty silence. Just empty. Like he'd already left and this was just the formality of his body catching up. "You're leaving me alone?" I asked. "For almost 2 months." "Lorraine will check on you," Garrett said. Lorraine, our housekeeper, 63 years old, who came 3 times a week to cook and clean. "She'll make sure you're okay." Lorraine couldn't administer medication. Lorraine wasn't a nurse. Lorraine was kind, but she wasn't family. "It's," I said. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "I need help. Every day. The pills have to be exact." "You'll manage," Simone said. She checked her watch like this conversation was already over. I looked into my son's eyes again. Searched for the boy who used to sit on my lap while I reviewed blueprints. The teenager who'd asked me how to build things that last. All I saw was that wrongness. Not cruelty. Not even indifference. Something worse, like he was looking at a problem that would solve itself if he just waited long enough. That night, I lay staring at the ceiling, Boston wind howling against century-old windows. Have you ever felt something shift in your gut, not fear yet? Just the shadow before fear arrives. On the bedside table, the heart medication bottle sat where it always did. Small orange plastic. White pills lined up like tiny soldiers. The label read, "Take 1 daily, same time, do not skip. Failure to comply may result in cardiac episode." I reached over, picked it up, shook it gently. The rattle was familiar, comforting. I didn't know yet that this was the last night real medication would sit in that spot. I didn't know that my son had already decided I wouldn't live to see day 53. I didn't know that in 72 hours those pills would be replaced with something else entirely. But somewhere deep in the part of me that built 40-year empires and survived every betrayal Boston's business world could throw, that part knew. Something was wrong, and I was about to find out exactly how wrong. The question about that envelope haunted me through the rest of that day. But by morning, I had more immediate concerns. The silence of that first morning alone was so complete, I could hear my own heartbeat. By afternoon, that heartbeat would tell me everything I needed to know. Day 1. April morning light coming through the bedroom curtains. The house felt larger somehow, like it had expanded in the night. Every sound echoed the refrigerator humming downstairs, pipes settling in the walls, my own footsteps on hardwood. I went through the morning routine. Bathroom, kitchen. The medication organizer sat on the counter where Garrett had left it, each day's pills separated into little compartments. Monday through Sunday. Week 1 of 8. I took the morning dose with water. The pill looked normal, small white, the familiar oval shape. Tasted the same. Slightly bitter. I swallowed and waited for the usual sensation, that slight numbness in my chest, that meant the medicine was working. It came. Everything seemed fine. By 2 in the afternoon, I knew something was wrong. My heart started beating in a way I'd never felt before. Not the usual irregular flutter the doctors had warned me about. This was different. Erratic. Like my body was fighting something. I sat down at the kitchen table, pressed my hand to my chest. Counted the beats. Too fast, then too slow. Then a skip that made me gasp. Just anxiety, I said out loud. My voice sounded strange in the empty house. The house is too quiet. You're not used to being alone. But I'd been taking this medication for 3 years. I knew what it was supposed to feel like. This wasn't it. I reached for my phone. Garrett's number was right there. One call. Did you refill my medication recently? Something feels off. My finger hovered over his name. Then I remembered the drawer, the envelope, the way he'd left without saying goodbye. I put the phone down. Because if I called now, if I showed weakness now, I would never know what he was really planning. He would have an answer ready. Would probably come rushing back, all concern and devotion, and I would never see the truth. My chest ached. Not the heart, something deeper. Do you know what grief does? It doesn't just take the person you love. It takes your vigilance, your instincts, your ability to see danger even when it's wearing your son's face. For 2 years, I'd let grief turn me into someone I didn't recognize. Someone who couldn't see what was happening in his own house. But that was ending. It had to end. I stood up from the kitchen table, steadied myself against the chair back, and walked upstairs to the bedroom. The nightstand had 3 drawers, the bottom one locked. I'd kept the key on my keyring since my wife's funeral, hadn't opened that drawer once in 2 years. Inside was her journal. Brown leather, worn soft from handling. She'd written in it every night for 43 years of marriage. I'd found it in her hospital room the day she died. Couldn't bring myself to read it. Locked it away, like that would preserve her somehow. Maybe it was time. Day 3. 3 nights alone in that house. 3 nights of erratic heartbeats and growing dread. I sat on the bed under the warm circle of the bedside lamp and opened the journal. The early pages were happy. Our wedding day, June 1971. Buying the mansion, she'd written 3 pages about the garden, how she was going to plant roses. Garrett's birth, his first steps, his first day of school. I read through tears. Her handwriting so familiar it hurt. The way she dotted her eyes with little circles. The way she always ended entries with "more tomorrow." But there wouldn't be more tomorrows. Not for her. I kept reading. Later pages. The tone shifted. March 2022. A year before she died. Garrett visited again today. Asked about the will. That's the 3rd time this month. I didn't tell Walter because I didn't want to worry him while he's been so tired lately. But I'm starting to be afraid. My hands started shaking. April 2022. Garrett brought his attorney to the house. Bernard said it was just routine estate planning. They stayed in Walter's office for 2 hours. When they left, some of the files were rearranged. I noticed because I dust that desk every week. I sat there holding her journal, feeling the weight of 2 years of willful blindness. She had seen it. Even dying, she had seen what I refused to see while healthy. I turned to the final entry. January 2023, 2 weeks before she died. The handwriting was shaky. She'd been so weak by then could barely hold a pen. But she'd written it anyway. I don't have much time left. The doctors say days, maybe a week. There are things I need to tell Walter, but he's not ready to hear them. So I'm writing them here, hoping somehow he'll find this when he needs it most. If you ever read this, my love, check the trust fund. The one we set up for Garrett. Do not leave it in Bernard's hands. I've seen the way he looks at our son. Not like an attorney advising a client. Like a partner planning something. I'm afraid. Not of dying. Of leaving you alone with people I don't trust. Be careful, please be careful. I love you. Always. The journal slipped from my hands onto the bedspread. My heart was beating erratically again. But this time it wasn't the medication. Emma, she knew. I whispered to the empty bedroom. You tried to warn me even as you were dying, and I didn't listen. God forgive me, I didn't listen. I picked up the journal again, pressed it to my chest. Her last words to me, and I'd locked them in a drawer for 2 years, because I was too afraid to face the pain of reading them. But she hadn't been writing about pain. She'd been writing about danger. Check the trust fund. Do not leave it in Bernard's hands. The trust fund held $80 million. Money we'd set aside for Garrett's future, for his children, for the legacy of everything we'd built. And my wife, the woman who'd stood beside me for 43 years, who knew people better than anyone I'd ever met, had died afraid that something was wrong with it. I closed the journal and held it against my chest in the warm lamplight. Grief was a luxury I could no longer afford, because my wife had tried to warn me. And somewhere in this house, in the medication, I was taking in the envelope Garrett had stolen in the 52 days he thought he needed. The truth was waiting. I just had to stay alive long enough to find it. For 2 days after reading the journal, I waited, watched my body, counted heartbeats, wondered how long I had. Day 6 morning gave me the answer. The bathroom floor was cold against my cheek, and I couldn't remember falling. One moment, I'd been standing at the sink, taking my morning medication. The next, tiles pressed against my face, and my chest felt like someone was squeezing my heart in their fist. I lay there gasping. 10 minutes, maybe longer. Tried to stand twice and couldn't. My left arm had gone numb. Vision went dark, came back, went dark again. Get up, I whispered. You've survived worse. Get up and find out what's wrong. But I knew what was wrong. Had known since day 1. I'd just been too afraid to prove it. When my breathing stabilized, I crawled to the bedroom. Grabbed the pill bottle with trembling hands. Made it downstairs to the kitchen, each step a negotiation with my failing body. I'd never questioned these pills before. You trust your family. You trust that the medication keeping you alive is actually medication. I found a kitchen knife, set one white pill on the cutting board, pressed the blade down until it split in half. The powder inside was beige, light tan. My real medication had white powder inside. Pure white. I dropped a bottle once, swept up the contents, noticed how clean it looked against the dark floor. This was different. I lifted the pill half to my nose. Wrong. The familiar, bitter chemical scent wasn't there. This smelled almost sweet, like cornstarch. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. I pulled out my phone, photographed the split pill, the beige powder clearly visible, sent it to Dr. Preston Holbrook, my cardiologist from before retirement, the man who'd prescribed this medication originally, who'd told me 3 years ago these pills would keep me alive as long as I took them exactly as directed. The message, Preston, is this what my medication should look like inside? He called back within 2 hours. I was still on the kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, the split pill above me like evidence at a crime scene. Walter, he said. His voice was tight. Wrong. In 30 years of friendship, I'd never heard Preston sound like this. Where did you get that pill? My medication organizer. The one my son filled before he left. Silence. Long enough, I thought the call had dropped. Preston. Walter, this isn't your medication. His words came careful, measured. This is a placebo, mostly cornstarch and binding agent. But there's something else too, I can see it in your photo. A small amount of what looks like a cardiac suppressant, enough to make your existing condition worse. Who did this to you? I sat on that kitchen floor for 20 minutes after he hung up. Not because I couldn't stand, I could stand now. The crisis had passed. But because once I made the next call, there would be no going back. My son would become something other than my son. He would become the man who tried to kill me. I stood up anyway. Day 8, late afternoon. Amber light through the office windows. I called Russell Caldwell, 65-year-old attorney, the man who'd helped me structure every major deal for 30 years, who'd stood beside me at my wife's funeral when I couldn't stand on my own. He answered on the second ring. Malter, are you all right? Russell, I need to read you something from my wife's journal. One line. I heard him shift, heard a door closing. He was alone now. I read it exactly as she'd written, "Do not leave the trust fund in Bernard's hands." 10 seconds of silence. Russell, do you know what she meant? His voice changed. Became the voice he used in depositions. Careful. Weighted. Yes. And there are things about Bernard Wolfe I should have told you months ago. I held back because I didn't want to worry you while you were sick. That was a mistake. I'm coming over. Don't call anyone else until we talk. When? I'm leaving now. Have you ever waited for someone to arrive knowing they're bringing proof that your entire life has been a lie? That's what those hours felt like. I sat in my first-floor office, the room I hadn't used since my wife died, where Garrett had taken that envelope 5 nights ago. I turned on the desk lamp, the same lamp I'd used for 40 years of contract reviews. Russell arrived at 9 p.m. carrying a thick manila file folder. He didn't say hello, didn't ask how I was feeling. Just walked to the desk and spread the file open under the lamplight. The first page was a photocopy. Legal documents. Operating agreement amendments for Harrington Development Group. Bernard Wolfe's signature at the bottom. Notary stamp. Date October 2022. 18 months ago. 6 months before I fell ill. A year before my wife died. And there on the signature line above Bernard's name, Garrett Harrington. I looked up at Russell. How long has this been happening? It was at least 18 months. Russell said quietly. Your wife saw it before I did. She tried to warn you. She came to my office twice last year. Asked me to review the trust fund documents. Said something felt wrong, but she couldn't prove it. What did you find? Nothing then. Bernard was careful. But after she died, I kept looking. Because she'd asked me to. Because she was afraid. He turned to the second page. Walter, your wife tried to warn you about more than the trust fund. She tried to warn you about Bernard, about what he and your son were planning. And now I can prove it. I looked down at the file. Page after page of documents I'd never seen. Amendments I'd never signed. Transfers I'd never authorized. All dated before I fell ill. All bearing my son's name and Bernard Wolfe's signature. I understood my wife's warning now. Understood what she'd seen in those final weeks. Understood why she'd written that entry with shaking hands even as she was dying. She'd known they were coming for me, and she'd tried to give me the tools to fight back. Russell turned the page. The document he placed before me was dated 18 months ago, 6 months before my heart began to fail. October 2022. I'd been healthy then. Still grieving my wife, but healthy. Working reduced hours at Harrington Development, but functional. No medication beyond blood pressure pills. And my son was already planning this. Bernard Wolfe started working with Garrett in fall 2022, Russell said. He spread 3 more pages across the desk. These are preliminary guardianship documents. Drafted but never filed. Practice runs. I looked at the pages. Legal terminology I'd seen 1,000 times in 40 years of business. Declarations of incompetence. Medical certifications of cognitive decline. Authority transfers. They were planning to have me declared incompetent. Yes and no. Russell pulled out another document. This is the genius of it, Walter. They had two plans. Plan A, you die naturally from your heart condition, they inherit everything. Plan B, you live but become legally incapacitated. But Bernard files guardianship claiming progressive cognitive decline. Garrett becomes your legal guardian and controls everything anyway. But I wasn't cognitively declining. To no. Which is why Bernard filed preliminary paperwork 3 weeks ago claiming you were. All lies. Medical forms signed by a doctor I can't verify exists. The pills were Plan A, kill you slowly, make it look natural. But they built Plan B as insurance. I sat back in my chair. The office felt smaller suddenly, colder. On the envelope, I said. The one Garrett took from this drawer the night before he left. What was it? Russell's jaw tightened. Amended operating agreement for Harrington Development Group, transferring all voting rights to Garrett. It had your signature on it. I never signed that. I know, Bernard forged it. I verified the original document, your real signature looks different. But if you'd died or been declared incompetent before anyone checked, it would have held up long enough for them to liquidate assets and disappear. My hands were shaking again. Not from the heart condition, from rage. The trust fund, I said. My voice came out rough. The $80 million trust fund my wife and I established for Garrett. Is it safe? Russell looked at me. For the first time that night, I saw something like hope in his eyes. You're the sole trustee. Only you can authorize transfers. They can't touch it without your signature, your real signature, witnessed and notarized. It's your ace, Walter. I closed my eyes, felt the weight of that knowledge settle into my bones. Good, I whispered. Then that's our weapon. 52 days. Garrett thinks that's enough time for me to die. For me, it's enough time to take back everything. We sat in that office until dawn broke over Boston Harbor. 2 men over 65 years old mapping out a war against my own son. But it wasn't a war I started. It was a war I intended to finish. Russell left at 6 in the morning, promised to return with more documents, contacts, strategies. I watched his car disappear down Commonwealth Avenue as the city woke up around us. Day 11. 7 in the morning. I was making coffee in the kitchen when I heard the knock, not the front door, the back gate. The service entrance we hadn't used in years. I walked through the garden, overgrown now, my wife's roses wild and untended. Opened the gate. Lorraine Fletcher stood there carrying a small overnight bag, wearing the same coat she'd worn the day Garrett left. 63 years old, gray hair, pulled back, eyes red like she'd been crying, or hadn't slept, or both. "Mr. Harrington," she said. Her voice shook. "Your son told me you wanted me to take some time off. Gave me $2,000. Said you needed space to rest. But I couldn't leave you alone. Not with her in this house." I stared at her. "Garrett told me you quit. Said you'd found other work. He lied." She stepped closer. "I worked in this house for 15 years. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know if you'd want my help or if you were..." She stopped. "I needed to know you were still alive and wanted to fight." "Come inside," I said. We sat at the kitchen table. The same table where I'd sat alone for 10 days, wondering if anyone in the world still cared if I lived or died. Lorraine pulled out her phone, pulled up a photograph, handed it to me. The photo was crystal clear. Taken from above, looking down into the second-floor medication room. The timestamp read, "Departure morning, 7:30 a.m." Simone stood at the open medication cabinet. In her hands, a small white pharmacy box. the kind that holds prescription bottles. She was looking down at it, face visible, no question of identity. Behind her, the cabinet door stood open. Every medication bottle visible on the shelves. "You took this—" My voice came out barely above a whisper. "I'm from the second-floor landing," Lorraine said. She didn't see me. I was cleaning the hallway. I heard her go in there, heard drawers opening. Something felt wrong. So I documented it. "How long have you kept this?" "Since day one, sir." Her eyes met mine, steady, certain. "I just needed to know you were alive and wanted to fight. Now I know." I looked at the photo again, zoomed in. The pharmacy box in Simone's hands had a label. Too small to read, but there. Evidence. Proof. The kind that holds up in court. "Come with me," I said. "I want you to meet someone. We have work to do." I called Russell. He came back within the hour. We sat in my office, 3 people. A 72-year-old dying man, a 65-year-old attorney, and a 63-year-old housekeeper. Against 18 months of conspiracy, millions of dollars, and a son who wanted me dead. I looked at Russell, then at Lorraine. "We have evidence," I said. "We have time. And we have something Garrett never expected." Russell raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" For the first time since my son drove away 11 days ago, I smiled. Each other. That smile didn't last long. 3 days later, Russell returned with information that made everything worse. What kind of woman researches a family name for 6 months before engineering a chance meeting with the heir who bears it? Day 14. Russell spread a new file across my desk. Thinner than Bernard's file, but somehow heavier. "I hired a private investigator," he said. "Background check on Simone. You need to see this." The first page was a meeting log from Bernard Wolf's office. Date April 2019. Nearly 5 years ago. 2 years before Garrett even mentioned dating anyone. Attendee Simone Harrington. Except her last name wasn't Harrington then. It was Richardson. Purpose of meeting. Inquiry regarding estate planning and inheritance law for prominent Boston families. She met with Bernard 6 months before she ever met Garrett, Russell said. His voice was quiet, careful, like he was delivering a diagnosis. She asked Bernard about Boston families with significant real estate holdings and unclear succession plans. Your name came up. The investigator found email records Bernard sent her public information about Harrington Development. Revenue holdings, ownership structure, everything available through business filings. I stared at the page. Satiti Krita. 3 weeks after that meeting, Russell continued. Simone attended a charity gala at the Boston Harbor Hotel. The Children's Hospital fundraiser. Garrett was the keynote speaker that year. You'd asked him to represent the company because you were still in early grief. I remembered. I'd stayed home that night. Couldn't face crowds. Sent Garrett in my place. She approached him at the reception, Russell said. Introduced herself. They started dating 2 weeks later. Married within 18 months. The room felt airless. So my son is also a victim, I said. The words tasted wrong. She used him from the beginning. Yes. Russell paused. But Walter, he's also the man who switched your medication and left you to die. Both can be true. I looked up at him. My son was chosen like a business acquisition. Selected for the name he carried, not the person he was. Yes. And when she realized I was the obstacle between her and the inheritance she convinced him to, I stopped. Couldn't finish. We don't know who proposed the murder plan, Russell said. Could have been her. Could have been both. But Garrett made the choice to participate. Made the choice every morning he filled that pill organizer with poison instead of medicine. Here's what I learned at 72: love and guilt are not the same thing. I could grieve for the boy my son once was, while destroying the man he chose to become. Both truths could live in the same heart. "I won't let paternal love make me weak again," I said. My voice came out harder than I'd heard it in years. He made his choice. Now I'll make mine. Russell nodded once. Good. Because we have work to do. Days 15 and 16 blurred together. The three of us, Russell, Lorraine, and I, spread asset maps and legal documents across the office desk until you couldn't see the wood underneath. Coffee cups multiplied. Lorraine brought food nobody ate. Russell outlined the strategy with the precision of a battlefield commander. 5 tasks before day 52, he said. 1. Legally confirm your 100% ownership of Harrington Development. File amended documents, get them notarized. Make your control absolutely explicit. 2. Freeze their fraudulent transfers under the Massachusetts Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act. 3. Activate the $80 million trust fund as our war chest, move it to accounts they can't see. 4. Document everything for both civil and criminal court. 5. Get Bernard Wolfe disbarred so their entire legal foundation collapses. He looked at Lorraine. Your surveillance. Monitor their social media. If they post photos from European restaurants while claiming concern for Walter, that goes in the evidence file. Track their spending if you can see it. Build the pattern of calculated abandonment. Lorraine nodded. Pulled out a small notebook. Started writing. Russell turned to me. And you have the hardest job. What's that? Psychological warfare. He leaned back in his chair. Garrett will call. Probably within the week. He'll want to check if you're deteriorating on schedule. And when he calls, you cannot be the man sitting in this office right now. I understood immediately. I have to perform, I said. Exactly. Speak slower than usual. Mix up place names. Ask repetitive questions. Describe symptoms that sound more dangerous than they are. Make him believe the pills are working. Make him lower his guard completely. Planning a counterattack against your own child is like building a courtroom inside your chest. Every piece of evidence weighs exactly what your heart can't afford to feel. And while you're performing, Russell added, we record everything. I've already installed an app on your phone that captures all video calls. If Garrett says anything incriminating anything at all, we have it for court. Lorraine looked up from her notebook. Can you do it, pretend to be dying while you're actually getting stronger? I thought about the question. Thought about 45 years of watching my son grow up, teaching him to tie his shoes, helping him with homework, walking him through his first real estate contract, standing beside him at his mother's funeral. Then I thought about the bathroom floor, the cold tile against my cheek, the pills in my hand with the wrong powder inside. Yes, I said. I can do it. We worked until midnight. Lorraine went home with assignments. Russell stayed until I'd signed the first set of legal documents, ownership confirmations, that would file with the state on Monday morning. At the door, he paused. Walter, are you ready for this? The performance of your life. I looked at the plan spread across my desk. 5 tasks. 41 days remaining. 3 elderly allies against an 18-month conspiracy built by my son and the woman who'd selected him like a stock portfolio. I thought of Garrett's empty eyes the night before he left. The way he'd walked past my bedroom without saying goodbye. When my son calls, I said, I'll be exactly the doting, senile old man he's waiting for me to become. Russell smiled. Not a happy smile. The kind generals wear before battle. Good, he said, because he'll call soon. And when he does, we start building his cage one recorded word at a time. The performance started 4 days later. My phone rang at 7:43 on day 20, and I let it ring twice before answering. A dying man wouldn't be sitting by his phone waiting. Garrett's face filled the screen. European afternoon light behind him, cafe terrace, wrought iron furniture. He looked healthy, tanned, rested. "Dad," he said, voice carefully concerned, but I heard the eagerness underneath. "You sound tired. How are you managing? Are you taking your medication on time?" I let my response come slower than normal. Added hesitation. "The medication, yes, Which medication were we talking about again?" I watched his shoulders relax, saw the tension leave his jaw. "Your heart medication, Dad. The pills in the organizer I left." "Oh, right. Yes. I've been taking those." I paused, rubbed my face like I was confused. "How's Paris? Are you enjoying Paris?" "We're in Rome, Dad. We left Paris a week ago." Rome. Of course. I let my eyes unfocus slightly. "Your mother and I went to Rome once. Or was it Venice? The details get mixed up now." He leaned closer to the screen, studying me, looking for signs. I gave them to him. "I've been having chest pains," I said. Let my voice waver. "Worse than before. And sometimes I wake up and can't remember where I am. Yesterday I thought your mother was still alive. Called for her. Then remembered." I trailed off, looked away from the camera. That sounds serious," Garrett said. But his face showed relief, not concern. "Maybe you should see a doctor." "I will, when you get back." "How long until you're home?" "Few more weeks, Dad." He paused. "When I get back, we'll need to go over some company paperwork. And Bernard mentioned those guardianship forms. Do you remember signing those?" There it was. The test. Bernard. I let confusion cloud my face. "Is he the one with the office downtown, the tall man?" Garrett's smile was small but unmistakable. "Yes. Don't worry about it. We'll handle everything when I'm back." We talked for 23 minutes. I asked the same question twice within 5 minutes. Mixed up names. Described symptoms that sounded more alarming than reality. Played the role of a man whose mind was slipping away. Garrett ate it up. By the end, he was barely hiding his satisfaction. "I love you, Dad," he said before hanging up. "Love you too, son," I whispered. The screen went black. After I hung up, I sat in that dark room for 10 minutes without moving. I had just performed senility for my own son. Pretended to forget my own attorney's face while my son asked if I'd signed away my life. And the most terrifying part, it had felt easy. I opened the recording app Russell had installed. The entire 23 minutes were there. Crystal clear, time-stamped, every word captured. I texted Russell. Got it. 23 minutes. He asked about guardianship papers on camera. Mentioned Bernard by name. Guard completely down. Response came within seconds. Perfect. That's evidence. Keep performing. I sat in the darkness and let myself feel it. The cold satisfaction of watching your enemy walk into the trap you built. My son thought I was dying. I was preparing to destroy him. On day 24 afternoon. I was reviewing legal documents when my phone buzzed. Lorraine's message. "You need to see this." Screenshots from the family email account. Garrett forgot to change the password. 3 images came through. The first was an email header. From Simone Harrington. To Whitmore and Sons Funeral Services, Boston. Date April 16th. 2 weeks after they'd left me alone. I opened the full screenshot. The Dear Whitmore and Sons. We are inquiring about pre-arrangement services for an elderly relative currently in critical health. Could you provide information on will processing timelines and the typical duration for real estate transfers following the passing? We want to ensure all affairs are handled efficiently. We would also appreciate information on your premium service packages and availability for scheduling within the next 4-6 weeks. Thank you, S. Harrington. I read it once in disbelief. Read it again with photographic precision. She'd signed it S. Harrington, used my family name, used it to book my funeral while my heart was still beating. The second screenshot showed the funeral home's response. Professional, detailed, discussing expedited estate processing and priority scheduling availability. The third screenshot was a follow-up email. Simone asking about grave plots. The funeral director's response included a phrase that made my blood run cold. Plots with optimal resale value in the historic section. Resale value. She was shopping for my gravesite based on resale value. I saved all 3 screenshots to the encrypted folder Russell had created, added them to the file that already held Dr. Holbrook's pill analysis, Lorraine's photograph of Simone in the medication room, Bernard's conspiracy documents, and the 23-minute video recording. Have you ever read your own funeral arrangements? Seen someone calculate the processing time for your estate before your heart has stopped beating? That's what evil looks like when it wears familiar faces. I texted Russell with steady hands. Satya, I have the funeral email, plus the 23-minute recording from day 20. We are winning. His response. How are you holding up? I looked at the files spread across my desk, at the evidence mounting like bricks in a wall, at the 41 days I'd survived when my son had given me 52 to die. I'm alive, I typed back. That's all that matters. I pulled up the funeral email again, read the date Simone had tentatively scheduled. Mid-May, day 60 of their trip. She'd planned 8 extra days. Buffer time, in case I took longer to die than expected. I stared at that email, at my daughter-in-law's careful words about will processing and real estate transfers, at the signature using the Harrington name like it already belonged to her. She'd booked my funeral with my money from an account bearing my family's name, and she'd asked about grave plots with optimal resale value. I closed the email, saved it one more time to be sure. 41 days survived. 11 to go until Garrett's return. But the most important work was still ahead, because having evidence wasn't enough. I needed to survive long enough to use it. That funeral email haunted me for 5 days. Then on night 29, my body reminded me that evidence wouldn't matter if I didn't survive to use it. The floor was harder than I remembered, and my chest felt like someone had reached inside and squeezed my heart with a frozen fist. 11 p.m. I'd been lying in bed when it hit, not the familiar, irregular flutter. This was different. Acute. Like my heart had forgotten how to beat and was trying to remember the rhythm while my body shut down waiting. I rolled off the bed onto the floor. Couldn't stand. Couldn't breathe right. My left arm had gone completely numb. My phone was on the nightstand. I reached for it with my right hand, fingers trembling so badly it took 3 tries to grab it. I opened the phone app, dialed 911, stared at those 3 numbers on the screen. 1 touch, 1 tap. Paramedics in 12 minutes. Ambulance, hospital, medical report filed. Police possibly involved because of the suspicious medication situation. News potentially leaking to Garrett in Europe, who might flee or destroy evidence. 22 days of evidence gathering still incomplete. I stared at that screen. At those 3 numbers that meant survival. My thumb hovered over the call button. Then I cleared the screen with a shaking thumb, scrolled to Lorraine's number instead. She answered on the first ring. Mr. Harrington, it's 11 at night. Bedroom floor. I gasped. Can't stand. Heart. The injection. Kitchen refrigerator. Russell's doctor prepared it. Hurry. I heard her voice change. Heard keys jingling. I'm 3 minutes away. Stay on the phone with me. But hurry! Those 3 minutes felt like 30. I lay on the cold hardwood floor of the bedroom where my wife died, phone pressed to my ear, listening to Lorraine's car engine through the speaker. Her breathing, her voice telling me to stay conscious. I heard the back gate open, heard footsteps running through the house, Heard her voice both through the phone and from the stairs. She appeared in the doorway, took one look at me and her face went white. "Mr. Harrington, oh God, I'm calling an ambulance when I'm..." So, I gasped. The injection. Kitchen refrigerator. Second shelf. Blue box. Russell's doctor. Real heart medication. Concentrated dose. "Hurry," she ran. I heard her feet on the stairs. Heard the refrigerator open. Heard her running back. She knelt beside me. Pulled a pre-filled syringe from the blue box. "Where?" "My thigh, muscle. Just push it in." She did. I felt the sting. Felt the medication burn as it entered my bloodstream. Then we waited. I made a choice on that bedroom floor that night. Not between life and death, between dying as a fool who loved too much, or surviving as the man who built an empire from nothing and refused to let thieves inherit it. My heart rate began to stabilize around 3 a.m. The crushing pressure in my chest eased. Breathing came easier. The numbness in my arm faded to pins and needles, then to nothing. Lorraine sat against the wall watching me. She hadn't moved in 4 hours. "You should have called an ambulance," she whispered. "You almost died." "I know. You chose this over survival. I chose this over letting them win." I sat up slowly. My body ached everywhere. "We have 22 days left. I'm not stopping now." She looked at me with an expression mixing fear and awe. Understanding that I'd just chosen possible death over compromising the mission. "Continue," I said. She nodded once. "Yes, sir. Day 35. 6 days after I nearly died on my bedroom floor. I left the mansion for the first time in 35 days. Russell's law office sat in the Boston Financial District 14th floor view of the harbor. The same view I used to have from Harrington Development headquarters before I got too sick to work. I sat across from him at the conference table. He spread documents between us like a general displaying battlefield victories. "The judge signed the emergency order in 48 hours, Russell said. "Every fraudulent transfer Garrett attempted is now frozen. The $80 million trust fund is locked down, your sole trustee. He can't touch a penny." I looked at the court seal. Official. Legal. Binding. "Then Harrington Development Group ownership?" I asked. 100% yours. Confirmed and filed. The forged operating agreement Bernard created has been legally invalidated. You are the sole owner, sole decision-maker. Garrett has zero authority. I let myself feel it. The satisfaction of watching legal machinery crush a conspiracy 18 months in the making. "How much has he spent so far?" I asked. "Shut the $180,000 on company credit cards. 35 days in Europe. Rome hotels, Michelin-starred restaurants, designer shopping on Via Condotti. He's posting photos on social media." "Good," I said. Russell looked up. "Good. Should I deactivate the cards now?" he asked. "No." I leaned back in my chair. "Keep them active. Let him spend. Every dollar he burns in Italy is another line item in his criminal indictment. Let him dig deeper." Russell smiled. Not a pleasant smile. "You want him to keep building his own prosecution?" "Exactly. He thinks those cards work because I'm too senile to notice or too dead to care. Let him think that. Let him spend 200,000. 250. Let him post pictures of $30 cocktails and $1,000 suits. Every receipt is evidence of calculated abandonment while his father dies alone. Garrett kept digging his own grave with every swipe of that credit card. 200,000, 210, 220. Each number climbing higher, each receipt another brick in the prosecution's wall, and he had no idea the wall was already built around him. 17 days. Russell said quietly. Until day 52. Until he comes home expecting to find you dead or incapacitated. 17 days to finish this, I agreed. I looked at the documents spread before me. The court orders, the frozen transfer notices, the trust activation papers, fraudulent transactions frozen, $80 million fund protected under my sole control. Bernard Wolfe stripped of his only legal weapon. 17 days left until Garrett opened that mansion door. The war was no longer theoretical. It had begun. Those 17 days narrowed to 9 faster than I expected. The email from the Massachusetts Board of Bar Overseers arrived at Russell's office at 9:42 on the morning of day 40. I was sitting across from him when his computer chimed. Watched his eyes scan the screen. Watched his expression shift from neutral to something like grim satisfaction. "It's official," he said. He turned the monitor so I could see. Official letterhead. Legal language. The kind that ends careers. The board finds attorney Bernard Wolfe violated Rule 3.3 of the Massachusetts Rules of Professional Conduct by making materially false statements to the court regarding Walter Harrington's cognitive capacity. After emergency review of submitted evidence, Mr. Wolfe's license to practice law in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is hereby suspended effective immediately pending formal disbarment proceedings. I read it twice, made sure I understood every word. "What does this mean for Garrett's paperwork?" I asked. Russell leaned back in his chair. "Every document Bernard signed, guardianship petitions, asset transfers, proxy agreements, all of it legally worthless. Massachusetts courts won't honor filings from a disbarred attorney, especially ones we've proven fraudulent." The amended operating agreement. Invalid. The guardianship application. Dead on arrival. Even if Garrett tried to refile with a new attorney, we have documentation proving it was based on falsified medical claims. No judge in Suffolk County would touch it. I tapped Russell's desk with my index finger. 5 times. The old habit from 40 years of closing deals. 5 taps meant the contract was solid. The terms were favorable. The victory was ours. "No lawyer," I said. "No valid filings. No access to frozen money. In 9 days, my son walks into a trap he built with his own greed." Russell smiled. Not a pleasant smile. The kind attorneys wear when opposing counsel realizes they've already lost. 18 months, he said. Bernard spent 18 months building a legal fortress around your son's conspiracy. Everything Bernard built, every fraudulent filing, every forged signature, every falsified affidavit gone. The Massachusetts Board of Bar Overseers erased it in one email at 9:42 a.m. What will Garrett do when he finds out?" Russell asked. I thought about that. He won't find out. Not until day 52. Not until he's standing in my living room expecting to inherit an empire and discovers he's inheriting a prison sentence instead. He could become dangerous. When cornered, "I know," I said. "I've thought about that. Which is why everything happens with witnesses present. You, Lorraine, maybe others. I won't give him the opportunity for violence." Russell nodded slowly. 9 days. 9 days. I left his office and drove home through Boston traffic. First time I'd driven in 40 days. The city looked different. Or maybe I was different. Hard to tell anymore. Day 43. Afternoon. I sat in my home office with the laptop open doing something that felt both necessary and soul-destroying. I was monitoring my son's social media accounts. They'd been posting obsessively. Garrett and Simone both. Every meal, every hotel, every experience documented and displayed like trophies. Simone's Instagram showed her in Geneva. New fur coat. Holding a Chanel bag I recognized from the luxury section of Neiman Marcus, $15,000. I'd seen my wife price it once and decide against the extravagance. The caption read, "Short life, live luxury." I stared at those 4 words. Short life. Posted while I was supposed to be dying alone in this house. No mention of concern for her husband's father. No pretense of grief. Just luxury. I took a screenshot. Saved it to the folder labeled Evidence Day 43. Garrett's post came from Paris. A Michelin 3-star restaurant I recognized from the background. The kind of place that requires reservations 6 months in advance. Champagne in crystal flutes. Caviar on mother-of-pearl spoons. The caption was worse, celebrating new beginnings. I read those 2 words until they stopped looking like words and started looking like a confession. New beginnings. He meant the beginning after I was dead. After he'd inherited everything. After 52 days of European vacation, while his father's heart stopped beating in an empty Boston mansion. Celebrating. I took the screenshot. Saved it. Opened the financial tracking spreadsheet Russell had created. The number kept climbing. $5,000 a day on average. While their father was supposed to be dying alone in Boston. You want to know what's harder than watching your son try to kill you? Watching him celebrate your death before it happens, documenting his joy so methodically that you forget he's still your child. I scrolled through more posts. Simone at the Louvre, Garrett at a vineyard in Tuscany. Both of them on a yacht off the Amalfi Coast, sunset behind them, faces glowing with happiness and expensive wine. Every photograph was evidence. Every caption was a confession. Every smile was another nail in the prosecution's case. I saved them all, screenshot after screenshot. Methodical, clinical. The way I used to review quarterly reports when I was healthy. Each data point cataloged each expense, justified or questioned each pattern, noted for future reference. Except now the data points were my son's arrogance. The expenses were my company's money spent while he waited for me to die. The pattern was attempted murder celebrated in real time on social media. I filed the last screenshot number 12 for day 43 and closed the laptop. $220,000 spent. Bernard Wolfe disbarred. Every legal maneuver neutralized. Fraudulent transfers frozen. Trust funds secured. 9 days until the door opened. 9 days until Garrett walked in, expecting to find a corpse or a senile old man ready to sign whatever papers Bernard had prepared. 9 days until my son discovered I was neither. But I still didn't know the answer to the question that kept me awake at night. Staring at the ceiling, counting my irregular heartbeats in the dark. When Garrett saw me alive, truly saw me healthy and clear-minded and waiting, what would he do? Would he run? Would he lie? Would he become violent? Or would he do something I hadn't prepared for, something that would force me to improvise in a game where I'd spent 43 days planning every move? I didn't know. And not knowing was the only part of this that still frightened me. The uncertainty about what Garrett would do lasted until day 45. That's when I learned exactly how long he'd been planning to kill me. The private investigator Russell hired spread bank records across the conference table, and the date on the first document made my blood turn to ice 6 months before my heart began to fail. Marcus Brennan specialized in financial fraud cases. Russell had hired him 3 months ago to quietly unravel Garrett's conspiracy thread by thread, and he'd done exactly that. Now he sat across from me in Russell's office, manila folders stacked between us like evidence at trial. "Mr. Harrington," Marcus said, "your son first contacted Bernard Wolfe about comprehensive asset succession planning in March of last year. 6 months before you contracted heart failure. This conspiracy predates your illness entirely." I stared at the date on the document. March 2023. I'd been healthy then, playing golf twice a week, still going into the office 4 days out of 7. He was planning this while I was still healthy. My voice sounded distant, like someone else was speaking. "Yes." Marcus pulled out another folder. "But it gets worse. Over the past 18 months, your son approached 3 different private banks in Boston. He presented himself as an heir about to receive substantial inherited assets, attempted to secure loans totaling $45 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. 45 million. Against wealth he didn't own yet. Using your empire, your living operational business, as collateral. These are the applications. Marcus spread them across the table. Dated, signed, notarized. All from before you became seriously ill. I picked up the first application, read Garrett's signature, read the section where he'd listed Harrington Development Group's estimated value, read the projected inheritance timeline he'd provided, all written while I was alive. He wasn't just killing me for my assets, I said. My voice had gone hollow. He was borrowing money against a corpse that wasn't even cold yet. Russell leaned forward. The banks denied him, obviously. No institution loans against anticipated inheritance without the estate holder being deceased. But the applications prove intent. They prove premeditation. They prove he'd been planning your death for at least 18 months. You think you know betrayal? Until you hold loan applications where your child used your life, your breathing, living existence as collateral for debt. Not your death. Your life monetized while your heart was still beating. I set the documents down carefully. My hands weren't shaking anymore. Something had shifted in the past 45 days. The father in me had died somewhere between the bathroom floor and Bernard's disbarment. What remained was colder. Harder. How many banks? I asked. 3. All private, all Boston-based, all within 6 months of each other. Names. Marcus listed them. Institutions I'd done business with for decades, where bankers knew my face, knew my company, knew my reputation. They all denied him, Marcus repeated. And 2 of them flagged the applications as suspicious. One banker actually tried to contact you about it last year. Left a voicemail. I remembered. A message I dismissed as a courtesy call. A banker asking to schedule a meeting about family financial planning. I'd been busy, grieving my wife. I'd never returned the call. Another warning I'd missed. I want copies of everything, I said. Every application, every denial letter, every piece of documentation. Already prepared. Marcus slid a flash drive across the table. It's all here. Admissible in both civil and criminal court. I picked up the flash drive, closed my fist around it. Thank you, Mr. Brennan. He nodded once. Your son is going to prison, Mr. Harrington. I've worked fraud cases for 20 years. I've never seen evidence this comprehensive. 2 days later, day 47, I stood in my living room, watching AV technicians install equipment that would end my son's life as he knew it. The screen needs to descend smoothly, I told the lead technician. When I press this remote, the projection should display immediately. No delays, no technical failures. This presentation happens once. Tested and ready, sir, he said. Ceiling mount is secure. Screen retracts completely when not in use. Wireless remote has fresh batteries. Your laptop connects via HDMI. I watched them work. The projection screen mounted above the fireplace where my wife's portrait used to hang. The high-definition projector attached to the ceiling crown molding. The wireless remote small enough to palm, powerful enough to control everything. Lorraine helped me rearrange the antique furniture. The sofa moved against the wall. 3 chairs positioned facing the screen like a defendant's bench. Like a courtroom, she said quietly. Because that's exactly what this is, I replied. When they walk through that door, the trial begins. Russell's laptop sat on the side table preloaded with the complete 52-day evidence presentation. I'd organized it myself. Every document in chronological order. Every photograph dated and captioned. Every recording transcribed and timed. The 23-minute video call where Garrett asked about guardianship papers. The funeral home emails Simone sent 2 weeks after leaving. The spending statements showing $220,000 in 47 days. Bernard Wolf's disbarment notice. Marcus Brennan's investigative report with the timeline that proved premeditation. The $45 million loan applications using my life as collateral. Lorraine's photograph of Simone in the medication room. Dr. Holbrook's analysis of the fake pills. All of it. Every piece. Every proof. I tested the system once. Pressed the remote. The screen descended smoothly from its housing above the fireplace. The first slide appeared sharp and clear, a title card reading, "The Evidence Against Garrett and Simone Harrington." Satisfied, I retracted the screen. Drew the heavy curtains over the windows. The room fell into afternoon shadows. I was transforming my living room into a courtroom, my home into a battlefield, my father's love into a prosecutor's cold precision. And the strangest part was how easy it felt. Lorraine left. The technicians packed their equipment and departed. Russell called to confirm the laptop was functioning properly. I sat alone in the wingback chair at the head of the room. Poured myself a cup of tea from my late wife's china set. The same set she'd used every Sunday morning for 43 years of marriage. Trap set, screen connected, evidence loaded. 5 days until my son opened that door, expecting to inherit an empire. 5 days until he discovered he'd inherited a prison sentence instead. I sipped the tea. It had gone cold. The living room looked exactly as it always had, elegant, familiar, safe. But it wasn't a living room anymore. It was a trap. And in 5 days, it would spring. The trap sat ready for 5 days. Then the waiting ended. 3 days before the door would open, my phone rang one final time with my son's face on the screen. Night of day. 10 p.m. I was sitting in the master bedroom when the call came through. Garrett's face filled the screen. European airport behind him, departure gate visible, the fluorescent lighting that meant boarding was imminent. "Dad," he said. His voice carried something I'd learned to recognize over the past 50 days. Eagerness barely disguised as concern. The tone of someone checking on a product's condition, not a father's well-being. "Just checking in before we fly back. How are you feeling? Are you okay?" I performed the role one final time. Let my voice come out weaker than it had on day 20. More confused. More tired. "Tired, son," I said. Let the words stretch out slightly. "Very tired. Don't want to talk long." I watched his face on the screen. Saw the tension leave his shoulders. Saw relief flicker across his features. "Okay, Dad." His voice had shifted. Less pretense now. More satisfaction. "We'll be home soon. Just rest. We'll take care of everything when we get back." He hung up quickly. No goodbye. No I love you. Just a satisfied click as he disconnected, confident his father was deteriorating right on schedule. I slowly put the phone down on the bedside table, turned to look at my wife's photograph in its silver frame. The picture from our 40th anniversary, her smile genuine and bright, taken just months before the cancer diagnosis. "You were right," I whispered to the photograph in the quiet bedroom darkness. "You tried to warn me even as you were dying. You saw what he was becoming, and I was too lost in grief to listen." My voice cracked. "I'm sorry, God forgive me, I'm so sorry." That apology to my wife's photograph was the last time I would let myself be just a man who loved and lost. After that night, I could only be what I needed to be, the architect of consequences. I touched the silver frame once. Then I turned off the light and went to sleep. Before I tell you what happened when that door finally opened, I need you with me. Comment A if you think Garrett will try to run, or B if you think he'll try to lie, and add one short reason why. Please note what follows includes some recreated details for emotional impact, but the lesson is what matters most. Day 52 arrived with gray Boston morning light. I rose at 5 a.m., showered, stood in front of my closet looking at suits I hadn't worn in years. My hand reached past the black funeral suit, past the charcoal business suits, from my last years at the office all the way to the back, where a garment bag hung untouched for decades. I pulled it out, unzipped it slowly. Inside was the navy blue suit I'd worn 40 years ago when I signed Harrington Development Group's incorporation papers. The day I'd built the foundation of everything Garrett was trying to steal. The fabric was still good. Well-made clothes last. It fit my thinner frame better now than it had in recent years. I dressed slowly, buttoned the jacket, looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like the man I used to be. The man who'd built an empire from blueprints and determination. Lorraine arrived at 7 a.m. I heard her key in the back door, heard her footsteps coming up the stairs. She stopped in the bedroom doorway. Her eyes filled. "Mr. Harrington," she said softly. "You look exactly like you did when she was alive, when you built everything." "That's who I need to be today," I said. "Not the grieving widower, the man who built this empire." We went downstairs together. The living room looked exactly as we'd left it. The projection screen hidden above the fireplace. The 3 chairs arranged like a defendant's bench. The laptop on the side table, evidence loaded and ready. I sat in the wingback chair at the head of the room. The same chair my wife used to read in on Sunday mornings. Book in one hand, coffee in the other, sunlight coming through the windows she loved. No bodyguards, no security team. Just me and Lorraine, and the evidence that would destroy my son's life. At 9:15, my phone buzzed. Russell's text. "Flight landed Logan 8:42 a.m. Garrett and Simone collected luggage. ETA your location approximately 11:30. I read it twice. Set the phone down on the arm of the chair. Poured myself a cup of tea from my wife's china set. The same cups we'd used every Sunday for 43 years of marriage. 11:30. 2 hours and 15 minutes until the door opened. Have you ever waited for a moment you spent 52 days preparing for, knowing that when it arrives, there's no turning back? That's what those final 2 hours felt like, time moving both too fast and impossibly slow. Lorraine stood by the window watching the street. Neither of us spoke much. What was there to say? 11 a.m. came, then 11:15. I sipped the tea. It had gone lukewarm. Lorraine's phone buzzed. She looked at it. "Russell says they just turned onto Commonwealth Avenue. 5 minutes. I set down the teacup. Folded my hands in my lap. The navy suit creased at the elbows exactly as it had 40 years ago. "Are you ready?" Lorraine asked quietly. "I've been ready for 52 days. 11:25, 11:26, 11:27, 11:28. I sat in that chair with the tea growing cold beside me, the evidence loaded and ready. Lorraine stood by the window watching the street. 11:28. 2 minutes. Then from outside, unmistakable sounds. Luggage wheels on cobblestone. Voices approaching. Keys jingling at the lock. Lorraine stepped back from the window. Looked at me. I nodded once. The key turned in the lock. The door began to open. The key turned in the lock at 11:47. I sat motionless in the wingback chair, my hands folded in my lap. The navy suit creasing at the elbows, exactly as it had 40 years ago. Lorraine stood by the window, silent, watching. Footsteps on the front porch, heavy, confident. The sound of someone who believed he was coming home to claim what he'd killed for. The door swung open. Garrett stepped through, first Italian designer luggage in his right hand, expensive leather bag over his shoulder. He was mid-stride, mid-sentence to Simone behind him, saying something about checking the house first. Then his eyes found me. I watched it happen in 3 seconds. Second one. His stride continued forward on momentum, his face still carrying that confident expression. The look of a man expecting an empty mansion and inheritance paperwork waiting on a lawyer's desk. Second two. His eyes focused, really saw me sitting there. His stride faltered. Confusion flickered across his face like static. his brain trying to reconcile what he was seeing with what should have been there. Second 3, recognition fully registered. Understanding crashed into him. The color drained from his face so fast I could track it: tan from Italian sun bleeding to white to gray. His hand reached for the doorframe to steady himself. He recognized the suit. I saw it in his eyes. The navy blue fabric, 40 years old, from the photograph that hung in his office at Harrington Development. The suit I'd worn the day I signed the incorporation papers. The day I'd built everything he'd tried to steal. The suitcase dropped from his hand, leather hitting hardwood. The sharp crack shattered the frozen tableau like a gunshot in a silent room. Simone appeared in the doorway behind him, mouth open to say something. Saw me. Froze mid-step, 1 foot on the threshold, one still outside. I looked at them both. My son who'd planned my death. My daughter-in-law who'd orchestrated it. Neither of them moved, neither of them breathed. I didn't stand, didn't speak. Pure stillness. Because silence is power, and I'd waited 52 days to wield it. The moment stretched. 5 seconds. 10. Garrett's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. I broke the silence with 4 words. No inflection. Absolute authority. Sit down, both of you. Garrett's mouth opened again. I raised one hand, palm out. The gesture alone stopped whatever he'd been about to say. No words needed. Just the single movement of a father who'd raised this man for 45 years and knew exactly how to command silence. His mouth closed. They moved like sleepwalkers to the chairs I'd positioned facing me. The chairs arranged like a defendant's bench, because that's exactly what this was. Leather creaked as Garrett sat. Simone's breathing was audible across the room, shallow, rapid, the sound of someone whose plan had just collapsed into rubble. Garrett's jaw worked. No sound came out. Lorraine stepped away from the window, her footsteps soft on the carpet. She moved to the side of the room where the projection screen was mounted on the wall above the fireplace, remote control in her hand. I leaned forward slightly. Let my voice come out calm, measured. The way I used to speak in boardrooms when closing deals that would make or break companies. 52 days ago, I said, "You left me to die in this house." Garrett's face went even paler. I didn't think that was possible, but it was. You changed my medication, I continued. You documented my decline. You transferred $80 million from the family trust. Pause. Let each fact land like a stone in still water. And then you disappeared. Simone's breathing had gone even faster. Garrett looked like he wanted to speak, but my earlier gesture still held him silent. I didn't die, I said quietly. I got better. And I've spent every one of those 52 days building your cage. Lorraine pressed the remote. The screen hummed to life. Descended smoothly from its housing above the fireplace. The projector activated with a soft mechanical whir. The first image appeared. Email screenshot. Enlarged. Crystal clear. Simone's email address at the top. I watched her eyes find it. Watched her realize what she was seeing. Recipient line: Boston Memorial Funeral Services. Subject line bold and black: Pre-arrangement inquiry. The date stamp in the bottom right corner filled the screen. April 16, 2024. 14 days after they'd left me alone in this house. I watched Garrett's eyes find it. Watched the calculation crash into him. Not negligence, I said into the silence. Premeditation. Garrett's face went from white to gray, the color of old ashes. Simone's hand gripped the arm of her chair so tightly her knuckles had gone bone white. Not negligence, I said into the silence. Premeditation. Lorraine's finger hovered over the remote. I knew what she was waiting for. The rest of the presentation. 47 more pieces of evidence queued and ready. Every document dated. every photograph captioned, every recording transcribed. But for now, I let the funeral home email stay on the screen. I settled back in my chair. The navy fabric creased at the shoulders exactly the way it had creased 40 years ago when I'd signed the papers that incorporated Harrington Development Group. When I'd built the empire my son had tried to murder me to steal, the first image stayed on the screen, glowing in the dim living room. Simone's words asking about burial plots for a man who was still breathing, still alive, still here. Silence filled the room again. But this time the silence belonged to me. Lorraine pressed the remote. The second slide replaced the funeral email. I began the presentation the way I'd run quarterly reports for 40 years. No emotion. Pure data. Clinical precision that cut deeper than rage ever could. April 16th. I said. Funeral prearrangements. 2 weeks after you left me alone in this house. Slide 3 appeared. Lorraine's photograph. Crystal clear. Simone standing in my medication room holding a white pharmacy box cabinet open behind her. Taken from the second-floor landing on departure morning. April 19th. I continued. Medication switch documented. Photograph taken by the woman you paid $2,000 to disappear. Garrett's face had gone from gray to ash white. Slide 4. Dr. Preston Holbrook's analysis. Chemical composition charts. The real medication on the left. The fake pills on the right. Red circles highlighting the differences. April 22nd. My first cognitive decline, caused by placebo pills containing cardiac suppressant. Analysis conducted by my cardiologist, the man who prescribed my actual medication 3 years ago. Each slide made Garrett visibly paler. I could see it happening. The tan from 52 days in Europe fading like someone was draining blood from his face drop by drop. Slide 5. Legal document. Official seal. Bernard Wolf, your attorney. Disbarred May 1st by the Massachusetts Board of Bar Overseers for falsifying guardianship petition affidavits. Every document he prepared for you legally worthless. Slide 6. Marcus Brennan's investigative report. Timeline graphics. Bank records. Meeting logs. Fanart 2023. 6 months before I fell ill. You contacted Bernard Wolf about asset succession planning. This conspiracy predates my illness entirely. Premeditated, calculated, planned while I was still healthy. Garrett's hands gripped the arms of his chair. His knuckles had gone white. Slide 7. Spending statements, restaurant receipts, hotel invoices, designer shopping bags and Instagram posts. $220,000. Spent in 52 days on company credit cards. Rome hotels. Michelin restaurants. $15,000 handbags. While your father was supposed to be dying alone. Slide 8. Bank documents. Loan applications. 3 different institutions. $45 million in loan applications. Collateral listed inheritance expected June 2024. From a father who wasn't dead yet. You tried to borrow against my corpse before my heart stopped beating. Lorraine paused the presentation. Garrett's breathing was audible across the room. Ragged. Desperate. I waited 3 seconds, then nodded. Next slide. Slide 9. Court order, official seal. Judge's signature. Emergency injunction. All fraudulent asset transfers frozen. Filed under Massachusetts Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act. Approved within 48 hours. Slide 10. Trust fund documents. The $80 million trust fund your mother and I established. Sole trustee me. You can't touch it. You never could. That money was always protected. I watched understanding dawn on Garrett's face. Everything he'd killed for out of reach. Everything he'd borrowed against frozen. Everything he'd planned for 18 months destroyed. The final slide appeared. No image this time. Just an audio file icon and a timestamp 2314. Lorraine pressed play. Garrett's voice filled the living room. The recording from day 20. His voice coming through laptop speakers echoing off the walls where he'd grown up. When I get back, we'll need to go over some company paperwork. And Bernard mentioned those guardianship documents. Do you remember signing those? My voice responded weak and confused. The performance I'd given. Bernard, is he the one with the office downtown? The tall man, Garrett's recorded voice satisfaction barely hidden. Yes. Don't worry about it. We'll handle everything when I'm back. Lorraine stopped the playback. The silence that followed was absolute. Simone's eyes were closed. Her face had gone rigid. Garrett stared at the blank screen, like it might offer him an escape that didn't exist. I leaned back in my chair, folded my hands. Let the weight of 47 pieces of evidence settle into the room like concrete hardening. Do you have anything to say? I asked. Garrett turned to look at Simone. Waited for her to speak. To explain. To fix this somehow. 30 seconds of silence. Then she stood. Her voice when it came was cold. Calculated. The voice of someone doing math in their head and deciding which numbers added up to survival. I want to cooperate, she said. Not to Garrett. To me. Only to me. I can provide more evidence of what Garrett planned, in exchange for a non-prosecution agreement. Garrett jumped up. His face had gone from white to the color of bone. Simone, she didn't look at him, not once, just kept her eyes on me, waiting for my response. Like Garrett wasn't even in the room. Like the man she'd married and manipulated for 5 years had ceased to exist the moment the evidence appeared on screen. Sit down, I said quietly. Both of you, neither moved. Stood down. They sat. I don't negotiate, I said. My evidence is complete. What happens next depends on Massachusetts law. Not on deals. Not on cooperation. On the legal system doing what it was designed to do. I watched Garrett's face as understanding crashed into him for the second time in an hour. His wife, the woman he'd committed murder, for the woman he'd destroyed his relationship with his father, for the woman he'd spent $220,000 trying to impress across Europe, had chosen him 6 years ago not for love, but for his last name, had planned his father's death before they'd even gotten engaged, had researched the Harrington Empire like a company acquisition target, and now, when the plan collapsed, was offering to trade him for her freedom without a moment's hesitation. He'd been nothing but a signature on her paperwork from day one. Garrett stared at Simone. 45 years old. My son. And in his eyes I saw the moment he realized he'd been used as thoroughly as he'd tried to use me. I looked at him across the coffee table. The navy suit creased as I leaned forward. For the first time in 52 days, I felt not the glee of victory, but the crushing pain of what I'd lost. Not the son who sat broken in that chair, but the boy I'd raised, the child I'd loved, the future I'd imagined when I'd held him minutes after he was born and whispered promises about the empire we'd build together. That boy was gone, had been gone for years, probably. Maybe since his mother died. Maybe since Simone found him. Maybe since the moment he'd decided money mattered more than honor. But the pain of losing him felt fresh, raw, like a wound that 52 days of preparation hadn't been enough to close. Pain didn't change what needed doing. I stood first movement in 40 minutes and picked up the white envelope from Lorraine's briefcase on the side table. Garrett and Simone watched me move, both still sitting in those chairs like defendants waiting for sentencing. I walked to where Garrett sat, placed the envelope on the coffee table in front of him. The paper made a soft sound against the wood. Inside, I said, is a civil court order freezing all fraudulent transactions you attempted. termination of all legal authority you claimed in Harrington Development Group, and a bank notice regarding $45 million in loan applications based on non-existent assets reported to FBI Financial Crimes. Garrett stared at the envelope like it might bite him. This house bears my name," I continued. "Company accounts lock in 5 minutes remotely by Russell Caldwell. You have 10 minutes to grab personal belongings and leave." His mouth opened. "Dad!" I turned my back, walked to the window overlooking the Boston garden my wife had planted 30 years ago. The roses she'd loved were blooming. She'd never see them again. I'd never share this house with her again. But I'd also never share it with the man who'd tried to kill me. Pain didn't change what needed doing. I turned my back. The conversation ended. Behind me I heard movement. Footsteps on the hardwood. The front door opening, closing. Lorraine appeared at my side. "They're gone," she said quietly. I nodded, kept looking at the roses. "Ma Russell just texted," she continued. "Accounts locked. Every card deactivated. Every access point frozen." "Good." We stood there in silence. The living room felt larger somehow. Emptier. Like something vital had been cut away, and the house was bleeding space. "What happens tomorrow?" Lorraine asked. I looked at the garden, at the roses blooming despite everything. "Tomorrow," I said, "we make sure this never happens to anyone else." Day 53, 8 in the morning. I wasn't there, but Russell called me at 8:15 to tell me exactly what happened. Later, he sent me security footage. I watched it 3 times. Garrett arrived at Harrington Development Group headquarters in an expensive suit. Italian cut. Probably bought in Rome with company money. He walked through the Boston financial district like he owned it, reached the ground floor lobby, pulled out his key card, swiped it at security. The reader beeped red. Denied. He tried again. Same result. The security guard, someone I'd known for 20 years, looked uncomfortable. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step aside." "This is my building," Garrett said, loud enough that people in the lobby turned to look. "I'm Garrett Harrington. There must be a mistake." The elevator doors opened. Diane Sutherland stepped out. HR director for 12 years. Competent, thorough. Someone I'd trusted to handle personnel issues with discretion and fairness. She carried a cardboard box. Inside the contents of Garrett's desk. Personal items, photographs, a coffee mug, and a termination letter. She walked across the marble floor. Her heels clicked in the silent lobby. Everyone was watching now. Employees, visitors, delivery people. "Mr. Harrington," she said, professional, distant. "Your employment with Harrington Development Group has been terminated effective immediately. This box contains your personal property. This letter contains the terms." Garrett's face flushed red. "You can't, I'm a Harrington. This is my... But you have no authority here," Diane said calmly. "Your father is the sole owner. Your access has been revoked. Security will escort you from the building if necessary." The elevator dinged again. Elliot Grayson emerged. 15 years at Harrington Development. Mid-level employee. Someone Garrett had probably never paid attention to. Someone who'd worked quietly, competently, loyalty, rewarded with steady promotions and fair treatment. Someone I'd asked to hold evidence 3 weeks ago. Elliot crossed the lobby, held a manila envelope. "Mr. Harrington," he said, not to Garrett, past him, to the watching crowd. "The old man, he told me about this. Asked me to keep these safe." He placed the envelope on the reception desk. Opened it. Pulled out documents. "Chaku. Copies of papers Mr. Garrett Harrington tried to force me to sign," Elliot said. His voice carried. Clear. Steady. "Claiming I witnessed his father's cognitive decline. Claiming I heard Walter Harrington make statements about succession planning. All lies. I refused. He threatened my job. Elliot pulled out a second document. Official seal visible. Notarized affidavit. He continued. Dated 3 weeks ago. Detailing every conversation, every threat, every attempt to coerce false testimony. The lobby had gone completely silent. Garrett stared at Elliot. I could see it on the security footage, the disbelief, the confusion. He'd thought he controlled everyone, thought loyalty could be bought or threatened into existence, thought being a Harrington meant automatic allegiance. He'd forgotten that I'd built that building brick by brick, hired those people one by one, treated them fairly for decades. He'd forgotten that loyalty is earned, not inherited. Security, Diane said quietly. 2 guards approached, gentle but firm. Garrett didn't resist, just stood there looking at Elliot like he'd never seen him before. They walked him to the door, out onto the street, into Boston morning traffic where nobody knew his name or cared about his suit, or remembered that 24 hours ago he'd thought he owned an empire. Russell sent me the footage at 9 a.m. I watched Garrett's face when Elliot appeared, watched the realization dawn, watched my son understand that he'd never actually controlled anything. That power built on fear and threats collapses the moment real authority steps in. That the Harrington name meant something in that building, but it wasn't his version of it. Garrett looked at Elliot Grayson with disbelief. 15 years. Mid-level employee. Someone he'd never worried about controlling. He thought he owned everyone in that building. He forgot I built it brick by brick. And the people inside remember who truly deserves the Harrington name. That lesson about the Harrington name lasted exactly 2 days before Garrett tried to rewrite the story. Russell called on day 55. He's surfaced, he said. Social media, playing victim. I was in my home office. The navy suit hung back in the closet. I'd returned to comfortable clothes, but the man who wore that suit, the builder, not the grieving widower, hadn't left. Show me, I said. Russell sent me the link. I opened it on my laptop. Garrett's post filled the screen. Childhood photographs. Him at age 7 sitting on my shoulders at the construction site of our first major development. Him at 12 wearing a suit too large for him at some company gala. Him at 20 graduating college, me shaking his hand. The caption was carefully crafted. Emotional without being hysterical. Calculated to generate sympathy. Sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest. My father, suffering from declining health, has made decisions that broke my heart. I dedicated my life to our family business only to be cast out in his confusion. I'm sharing this not for pity, but because elder care is complicated and families struggle in private. If you're going through something similar, you're not alone. A few comments had already appeared. Sympathetic strangers offering support. People who didn't know the full story. How many people have seen this? I asked Russell. About 3,000. It's been up for 40 minutes. Starting to spread. I nodded, looked at the photographs. They were real. Those moments had happened. That boy on my shoulders had been real. But the man who posted them, trying to weaponize childhood innocence to cover attempted murder, that was real too. Release everything, I said. Boston Globe, Associated Press, every document, every recording, every piece of evidence. The funeral home emails, everything. And the 23-minute call where he asks about guardianship papers. Everything, I repeated. And issue a statement from Harrington Development. Simple, direct. We confirm all allegations. We're cooperating with investigators. No ambiguity. Russell was quiet for 3 seconds. That will destroy any narrative he's trying to build. That's the point. 2 hours later, the Boston Globe published the story. The headline was clinical. Harrington Development heir accused of elder financial exploitation attempted murder. The article included everything. Funeral emails dated while I was alive. Medication analysis showing fake pills. The 23-minute recording with full transcript. Spending records showing luxury European vacation while father deteriorated. Bank loan applications listing inheritance as collateral before death. Associated Press picked it up within 30 minutes. Then local news. Then national outlets. Garrett's post stayed up for 3 hours before he deleted it. 3 hours. That's how long his narrative lasted. The sympathetic comments disappeared, replaced by horror, disgust. People who'd initially offered support now apologizing for being fooled. Some demanding investigation. Some calling for prosecution. I watched it happen from my office. Didn't feel satisfaction, didn't feel victory. Just watched truth replace lies in real time across the internet. June arrived. With it came the civil hearing. Massachusetts Superior Court, Suffolk County. The building where I'd handled business disputes for 40 years. Where I'd won and lost cases that determined company futures. Now it would determine my son's. Judge Arthur Pembroke presided. 28 years on the bench. I'd appeared before him twice in the early 2000s. He'd been fair both times. Methodical. Someone who followed evidence regardless of names or money. Russell presented our case. Every document organized, every recording transcribed, every timeline mapped. Garrett sat at the defendant's table with a new attorney. Someone expensive judging by the suit. Someone who probably took the case thinking it was defendable. Simone sat separately. Her attorney had already negotiated some kind of cooperation deal. She wasn't testifying today, but her presence filled the room like cold air. Garrett's lawyer stood when his turn came. Young. Confident. The kind of confidence that comes from not yet losing a case you thought you'd win. "Well, Your Honor," he said. "While the evidence shows poor judgment and family conflict, there's insufficient evidence of criminal intent to support." Judge Pembroke raised one hand. "Counselor, I've listened to the 23-minute recording where your client explicitly asks his cognitively impaired father about guardianship documents. I've read the funeral home emails dated 2 weeks after abandonment. I've reviewed the medication analysis. The intent is not insufficient. It's documented." The lawyer's confidence cracked. "Your Honor, asset transfers are nullified," Judge Pembroke said. His voice was steady, clinical. Mr. Garrett Harrington will repay $220,000 in unauthorized expenditures to Harrington Development Group, plus $50,000 in fines under Massachusetts elder financial exploitation statutes. Harrington Development ownership remains solely with Walter Harrington. And, he paused, looked directly at Garrett. This court refers this matter to the Suffolk County District Attorney for investigation of potential criminal charges under General Law, Chapter 265. Section 16, attempted murder by poisoning as well as elder abuse under Chapter 19A. The evidence suggests criminal conduct beyond this court's civil jurisdiction. The gavel fell. The courtroom went silent. Not the silence of surprise, the silence of finality. I looked at Garrett across the courtroom. 45 years old. My son. Waiting for district attorney criminal charges that could send him to prison for attempted murder. He looked back at me. For 1 second, just one, I saw the boy who used to help me review blueprints on Sunday mornings. The child who'd ask questions about foundation depths and load-bearing walls. The teenager who'd wanted to understand how buildings stood up against time. Then the moment passed. The gavel fell, courtroom silent. Victory felt like ash, but it was enough. Not justice, not revenge, not even closure, really. Just enough. This wasn't his end. The real ending would come when the DA called him. When criminal prosecutors decided whether 18 months of premeditation and 52 days of attempted murder warranted prison time. But for me, this was enough. Civil justice was enough for me. But the world had its own accounting to finish. Russell called 2 days after the hearing. "You need to know what's happening to him," he said. I was in the garden. My wife's roses. They'd bloomed twice since she died. She'd never see them again, but they kept blooming anyway. "Tell me," I said. "Accounts frozen per court order. The banks recalled the $45 million in loans. All of it. He's facing debt he can't repay in 3 lifetimes." I said nothing, just listened. The social media exposure destroyed his reputation. Russell continued. "No one in Boston's business will touch him. The stories everywhere. Attempted murder, elder exploitation. His name is permanently associated with those words now. And Simone filed for divorce yesterday. Her lawyer had the papers ready before the trial even ended. Just waited for the judgment to make it official. I could picture it. Simone's calculated exit. The same cold precision she'd used to plan everything else. "Where is he now?" I asked. "Rented apartment, Alston, cheap. He's broke Walter, no job, no wife, no access to family money. The Harrington name that used to open doors, now it closes them. 48 hours. That's all it took for everything to collapse. Not months, not years. 2 days. Proof that he'd built his entire life on fraud. Remove the foundation of lies, and the whole structure falls instantly." "How are you?" Russell asked. "Tired," I said. And I was. Not the physical exhaustion from fake medication. Something deeper. No glee, no satisfaction. Just fatigue that went bone deep. The letter arrived 1 week after the trial. I recognized the handwriting on the envelope before I even picked it up from the front step. Garrett's script. The same hand that had signed loan applications and forged documents and written captions for Italian vacation photos. I stared at it for a long time. Held it up to the light like it might contain something dangerous. Finally opened it. 5 pages. Handwritten. No typed formality. Just pen on paper. At it began. Not father, not Walter, just Dad. I read it standing in the living room where I'd presented the evidence. Where the projections and screen still hung above the fireplace, hidden but ready. He didn't beg for money. Didn't ask for forgiveness. Didn't try to explain away what he'd done. He wrote about being 5 years old. About thinking I could build anything. About watching me review blueprints and believing his father was the most powerful man in the world. He wrote about growing up in a shadow too large to escape. About every achievement measured against mine and found wanting. About Simone telling him he'd never be his own man until he stepped out from under my name. No excuses, just explanations. The difference mattered. The final paragraph was shorter than the rest. I know you won't forgive me. I'm not asking you to. I just want you to know I still remember what you taught me first. Before anything else, honor matters more than money. You taught me that when I was 7 years old. I forgot it. And I will live with that failure for the rest of my life. I folded the letter, placed it in the drawer, next to her journal, where all the painful truths lived. Early June, 1 week before July arrived, I walked into Harrington Development Group headquarters for the first time since the trial, took the elevator to the executive floor, stepped into the CEO office I hadn't entered in years. The view was the same. Boston Harbor stretching out below, ships moving in and out. The city I'd helped build rising against the skyline. Elliot Grayson was waiting. 15 years with the company. The man who'd stood in that lobby with evidence when it mattered. Elliot. I said, "You stood up when others stayed silent. You testified when it would have been easier to look away. I'm appointing you interim CEO of Harrington Development Group." He stared at me. "Mr. Harrington, I'm I don't have the experience. You have integrity, I said. Everything else can be learned. Integrity either exists or it doesn't. You've proven yours. I sat in the CEO chair one final time. 40 years I'd occupied this room. 40 years of looking out at that harbor, making decisions that employed thousands and built a city's skyline. 40 years in this chair looking at Boston Harbor. The view never changed. I stood, reached for the corporate ID badge clipped to my jacket, removed it, placed it on the desk. Elliot looked at the badge, then at me. You're not keeping it, I smiled. First real smile in weeks. I built this place, Elliot. I don't need a badge to know it's mine. And I don't need to sit in this office every day to know what we created here matters. I walked to the door, paused, looked back at the office one more time. Not with regret, not with longing, just acknowledgement. This had been my life. Now it was time for someone else to carry it forward. The company's in good hands, I said. Make sure it stays that way. I walked through the lobby, past the spot where Elliot had stood with that envelope defending truth when it cost him something. Past security guards who'd known me for decades. Past the cornerstone I'd laid in 1984 with my wife beside me, both of us believing we were building something that would last. We had, just not the way we'd imagined. Outside, June's sun warmed my face. Boston traffic flowed past. People walked by without recognizing me. The city moved forward like it always had. I breathed. Deep breath, full lungs, Boston air, and for the first time in months, since before the pills were switched, before the 52 days began, before I'd worn that navy suit and waited for a door to open, my chest didn't hurt. The building still stood behind me. My name still hung on it in brass letters above the entrance, but it didn't own me anymore. I was just a man. 72 years old, widowed, betrayed, survived, walking home through a city I'd helped build, finally able to breathe again. The kitchen smelled like my wife's chicken soup recipe, the one Lorraine Fletcher had learned by watching her cook 20 years ago, back when my wife still stood at this same stove stirring the same pot. I watched Lorraine's 68-year-old hands move with practiced efficiency, measuring salt, the way Evelyn used to, 3 pinches from the ceramic bowl we'd bought in Florence in 1982. You need to eat more than pride, Mr. Harrington," Lorraine said, setting the bowl in front of me. Steam rose between us, carrying rosemary and thyme. I picked up the spoon. The first taste hit my tongue, chicken carrots, that specific warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. My throat tightened. My vision blurred. "Walter." Lorraine's voice softened, dropping the formal address for the first time in 2 decades. I set the spoon down carefully, the way a man places a fragile thing he's afraid of breaking. My eyes burned. A tear traced down my cheek, the first since I'd stood at Evelyn's grave 18 months ago, the first since I'd discovered what my son had become. "It tastes exactly like hers," I said. Lorraine sat down across from me, her own eyes wet. She taught me that the secret wasn't the ingredients. It was cooking for someone you cared about. The tears came faster. 52 days of controlled performance, calculated moves, systematic destruction of my son's conspiracy, and this housekeeper's kindness broke through what Garrett's attempted murder couldn't touch. I cried into my wife's soup recipe, while the woman who'd stayed loyal to our family for 20 years simply sat with me, understanding that gratitude sometimes needs witness. "Before you judge me for crying over soup instead of attempted murder, understand this: the human heart doesn't break where you'd expect. Betrayal hardens you. Loyalty cracks the shell. Well, thank you for staying," I said when I could speak. "After everything became public, you could have what?" Lorraine's voice carried steel beneath the warmth. "Abandoned a man fighting for his life. That's not how honor works, Walter. That's not what your wife would have wanted. I finished the soup. Every spoonful tasted like memory, like the marriage I'd built, like the values I'd tried to pass to a son who'd rejected every one of them. My phone rang at 2:15 that afternoon. Russell Caldwell's name appeared on the screen. "It's official," Russell said without preamble. "Suffolk County District Attorney filed charges this morning. Garrett Harrington and Simone Harrington conspiracy to commit murder under Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 265, Section 16, maximum 20 years each." I stood in the living room, where I'd performed my final video call 43 days ago, where I'd waited in my Navy suit while my son arrived expecting a corpse. The June sunlight slanted through the same windows, but the quality of light had changed, sharper, clearer, like looking at the world without prescription glasses you didn't know were wrong. "Bernard Wolfe?" I asked. "Separate indictment. Conspiracy fraud, 3 counts of professional misconduct. He'll never practice law again even after he serves his sentence. 20 years. The number hung in the air like a verdict against my entire life. I'd built an $80 million empire, developed 17 properties across New England, employed 400 people, and my only child would spend the best years of middle age in a Massachusetts state prison. "Walter?" Russell's voice gentled. "You did the right thing." Did I? The question escaped before I could stop it. "I saved my life, Russell. I destroyed my son." "I'm not sure those are the same thing. He tried to kill you for money." "I know what he did." I looked at the chair where Garrett had sat, where I'd watched terror cascade across his face when he realized I'd survived. "I know exactly what he did. That's the burden, Russell. Knowing it completely." We ended the call. I sat in the chair, my chair, the CEO position I'd earned across 47 years, and let the weight settle. Justice delivered. Indictments filed. The system would handle the rest, but the hollowness remained the space where a son used to be. Winning doesn't feel like they tell you in the movies. There's no triumphant music. Just silence and the knowledge that you'll carry this until the day you die. July arrived with morning heat and garden roses blooming exactly as they had for 34 summers. I sat in the back garden at 6:30 watching sunrise paint the Back Bay mansion's brick walls gold and amber. My wife's journal rested on my lap, the one I had locked away for 2 years, the one that had warned me about Bernard Wolfe's conspiracy. I opened to the final entry, dated 3 weeks before her death. "Walter worries about legacy. He thinks he needs to pass everything to Garrett because that's what fathers do. But legacy isn't genetics, my love. It's earned through character. If our son proves himself worthy, then yes, give him everything. But if he proves himself false, remember this. Not everyone who bears our last name deserves our legacy." The words hit with the force of prophecy. My wife had seen clearer than I did, understood what I'd refused to accept. Legacy wasn't birthright. It was consequence of choice. I thought of Elliot Grayson, 39 years old, no blood relation, appointed CEO of Harrington Development Group, because he'd earned it through 15 years of integrity. I thought of Lorraine staying loyal when loyalty cost her social standing. I thought of Russell and Dr. Holbrook and Marcus Brennan forming the alliance that saved my life. Family wasn't always who you expected. The garden was quiet. No traffic noise reached this far back. Just bird song and wind through the maple tree we'd planted when Garrett was born, the tree that would outlive us all, roots deeper than blood. I spoke the words aloud, testing their weight, offering them to the morning and to the wife I still loved. And to anyone who needed to hear them. Not everyone who bears our last name deserves our legacy. Silence. Peace. And to you listening to my story, remember this: not everyone who bears your last name deserves your legacy. Looking back, I realize I made a terrible mistake. I trusted blindly because of blood relation. I ignored the warning signs, my son's sudden interest in my health, the convenient timing of his business trips, the way he'd ask about my medications. I assumed family meant loyalty. I was wrong. Don't make my mistake. Love your children, but watch their actions, not just their words. The lesson I learned through this ordeal is simple, but brutal. Family justice isn't about revenge. It's about protecting what you've built with honor. When those closest to you become your greatest threat, seeking family justice becomes survival. I believe God allowed me to survive for a reason, to show others that Dad's revenge stories aren't just about anger. They're about standing firm when everything you believed in crumbles. True family justice means holding people accountable, even when it breaks your heart. Legacy must be earned through character, not claimed through manipulation or murder. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever faced a similar betrayal? What would you have done differently? Please share this with someone who might need to hear it. And if you appreciate Dad's revenge stories like mine that carry real lessons about family justice, please subscribe to Wise Revenge for more stories that matter. Thank you for staying until the very end. Your time and attention mean everything to me. One final note: while the core truth of this story is real, some details have been adjusted for privacy and storytelling. The lesson remains unchanged.